In this video, I try my hand at the pottery wheel. In the spring, I had a total of 5 lessons, learning how to make a basic cylinder. And 2 months later, this is what I remember. I started by wedging 600 grams of clay. To do this, it's best to stand, and then use the heels of your hand to push the clay down and forward, rocking it back towards you and repeating. The clay should start to look a little bit like a monkey's face with a spiral on the side. Wedging the clay removes any air bubbles in the clay. Without removing the air bubbles, your piece may explode when fired in the kiln. I lightly wet the head of the wheel before I put the clay down. I make sure the bottom of the ball of clay is round so it doesn't trap any air when I slap it down on the head of the wheel. To center the clay, use lots of water and make sure that your left elbow is anchored into your hip bone so that you have control of the clay and can push it towards the center of the wheel. The next step is called coning the clay. This is done using both hands and pulling the clay up into a cone, and then holding the cone with the left hand and using the side of the right hand on a slight angle away from you and pushing the clay down until it forms something that looks like a hockey puck. Cone the clay about 2 or 3 times, and this is important because it gets all the particles and all the molecules of the clay moving in the same direction. Now it's time to open up the clay and form a base. Keeping your left arm braced, rest the arm on the plastic of the wheel tray, and then with your right hand, take 2 fingers and push down in the center to form a hole. The outside hand keeps the clay centered. Now you want to widen the base. So you put your 2 fingers in and you pull the clay out towards your body at a 90-degree angle. Then insert the needle tool into the base and mark it with your finger. You should pull it out and it should be about 5 to 6 millimeters. Use a sponge to compress the bottom and soak up any excess water. Now it's time to pull the clay. So at this point, you're going to want to lean right over the pot so that you're pulling directly up. If you're sitting back while you're pulling the clay up, you're going to pull the clay towards you. So you want to make sure that you're looking directly over the pot as you gently pull the clay up. When I'm pulling the clay, I like to use my finger on the inside and my knuckle in a sponge on the outside. You want to make sure you don't pull the walls out past the base of the pot. Remember to keep even pressure with every pull. If you vary the pressure as you're doing a pull, your walls will be uneven. You'll get thin areas and thick areas. After you've completed a pull, it's a good idea to use a wet sponge and compress the top ring of the pot. The sponge is probably the most important tool that you have. You have to keep the clay wet while you're using it, but at the same time you have to keep mopping up the water that sits in the bottom of the pot so that the bottom doesn't get too compromised. At this point, I have a basic cylinder, but I want to make it look a little bit fancier, so I'm going to collar in the clay. I'm going to put my hands around it and bring it in, and then take the rim of it and push that out. Now, keep in mind, it's still going to be a pretty basic pot. I've only had 5 lessons, but my point is that if I can try something new and have some sort of success, then anybody can try it. And pottery is something that's really relaxing and fun, and I recommend giving it a try. Now here I'm using a little bit of pressure, pushing in with the sponge on the outside and pulling out a little bit on the top with my fingers, and that will create that rim on the top that I wanted. Here I'm using a tool to clean up some of the excess clay at the base of the pot, and that's left over from when I centered the clay. Cleaning up some of the extra clay now makes it easier to remove the pot from the wheel, and it'll make it easier when it comes to trimming the pot. When you're removing the pot, it's a good idea to have water on the far side of the wheel, so that when you're dragging the wire underneath the pot, you're also dragging some of the water underneath and breaking that suction that's holding the pot to the wheel. Lifting the pot off the wheel is probably the scariest part of the whole process. And here's a picture of the pot before and after trimming and glazing. There's something very satisfying about making something from scratch. The problem is, what do you do with all the pots you've made? You can support my channel by subscribing so YouTube will share my videos with more people. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you ring that bell, you'll be notified every time I post a video. Thank you for watching.